I just had a nice conversation with French tourists. They approached me and were admiring a bit my Land Rover. They have the Land Rover 130 parked down the road. So we had a nice talk. And now there is a last thing I need to take care of before leaving. It's replacing the fuse. As you could see, I was looking for it quite intensely, but I didn't succeed. So I have two options, because I have a 100 amp fuse for my other things in the car, but it's a bit different, as you can see. But they're quite similar in size, so I would try to put it into the housing of the original one and see if that works. Hopefully it will. I just need because this is for the compressor. I just need it for a short moment because the pressure in my bags, the suspension bags, it's a little bit too low. I need it to be around 2 bars. I have 1.2, 1.3. So I need just a little kick of the compressor to bump up until I reach like 3 bars in the tank, and hopefully it will work. And yeah, let's see if it's doable.
A significant portion of the added electrical components in the Prowler is hidden under this small seat. Both compressors, which power the OBA system, are installed here, along with the fuse housing that protects the compressor installation. The fuse housing is designed as a glass tube with a screw-on dome that secures the fuse. To access it, you simply unscrew the dome and the fuse socket slides out on a wire from the plastic casing, allowing you to insert the fuse. The fuse I had fit the width of the socket, but I wasn't happy with the small contact surface, as it would likely generate more heat. However, not wanting to go with the alternative, wiring the old fuse, I decided to proceed with this solution. Since the system wouldn't be operating continuously, the heating issue shouldn't be a significant problem. Once tightened, all that remained was to test the system's operation. And as you can see,
The pressure is rising.
the operation was a success. The compressor started up and began filling the tank with air. I only ran the system long enough to reach the pressure necessary to inflate the air springs.
This is for the left back.
3 bars of pressure turned out to be insufficient, as it was enough for only one air spring. Later I discovered a leak in the lines too. However, at that moment, this level of system functionality was sufficient.
I need a bit more.
After a short while, both air springs had 2 bars of pressure, which gave me significantly more peace of mind for the continuation of the journey through the mountains.
Yeah. Nice.
Given the weather conditions, it took me a bit longer to pack up the camp than usual. I never fold up wet awnings as I don't want to shorten the lifespan through potential mold. I never know when I will have the chance to open them again, so I prefer to dry them as much as possible. The wiping process takes some time. It's not easy to reach everywhere, so I won't show you the whole process in real time, because you would definitely scroll through it anyway. I think the view of the surroundings is definitely more pleasant and interesting. After drying, the process of rolling up the awning takes place, which is quite demanding for one person. The material must be rolled up quite tightly onto the roof structural elements, because otherwise the awning will not close. And this requires pushing the entire roof forward quite strongly and distributing the force evenly. Additionally, during this process you have to tuck the legs into one part of the bar and the supports into another, simultaneously shortening them by twisting one part relative to the other. All with one hand, as the other holds the awning up, still applying outward force to the whole structure, making the operation quite a cumbersome process. And even so, in the case of the rear awning, it is easier. Here, there's also the necessity of working with the doors open, as the spare tire limits the ability to roll up the awning, so you have to remember to open the doors as well. When rolling up the side awning, I repeat all the previous steps, but it's a bit more challenging because it's larger. This takes even more time, which I'll spare you by letting you enjoy the beauty of the surroundings once more while clearly cutting the footage in the meantime. As you can see, after a full rotation of the camera, the awning is already rolled up. All that's left is to pack away the remaining camping gear, then, of course, fall down the roof, and we're ready to hit the road again. From my campsite, I head back the same way I came. Simply put, there's no other option. This time, the views are less captivating, largely due to heavy cloud cover that has blanked the surrounding peaks in a thick layer of mist, dulling the charm of the landscape. Or perhaps it hasn't dulled it at all. The character of the scenery has simply shifted dramatically. Yet still, a deep Georgian green, unlike anything I've seen elsewhere, combined with the cold grey of the sky, created an incredible tableau unfolding outside the windows of the Prowler. When I reached the main trail leading east from Uchguli, I was in for a shock. The road I found myself on bore no resemblance to the trail I traveled in 2015. Which looked like this. Driving through the mountains on a road like this is a completely different experience compared to a smooth gravel tracks. Every kilometer is a challenge, especially when you're on an overloaded vehicle with 2 blown rear shocks, but the rugged dirt trail rewards you with a sense of uniqueness and that feeling of being in a place not everyone dares to reach, and to witness such a night. Did you notice a meteor caught on my time-lapse before the sky got covered in thick clouds? Looking back at the road then and now, back then, the trail east of Uzhguli was an entry into a still, pristine world where one could feel part of unspoiled nature. The dirt track, winding through green meadows and rugged mountain peaks, led to places where silence and the majesty of the nature set the rhythm of the journey. Every kilometer felt like discovering an unknown, remote corner of the world. Traversing the mountains on a civilized route like this offers comfort and predictability. You can focus on admiring the views through the window without worrying about damaging your vehicle or having to pull it out of the mud. Such a journey is quick and accessible to everyone, which undeniably promotes tourism and makes it easier to reach one's remote places. However, this convenience comes at the cost of losing the primal wildness and sense of discovery. Places that once posed a challenge became just another stop along the way. For example, the place you see here in 2015 was just a tight bend on the trail, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding peaks with the karst range of the horizon and a deep gore below. You might think it's absolute wilderness, but soon there will be crowds of tourists at the viewpoint being constructed here. Both forms have their charm, but a dirt road allows you to truly experience the essence of mountain freedom and closeness to nature. While traveling along dirt road, nothing extraordinary might seem to happen, yet the uneven terrain, rocks, mud, streams to cross, and unguarded steep drops makes the journey an adventure in itself. Such a trip demands focus and attentiveness. At times, this concentration, engaging all your senses, might even take away the ability to fully appreciate the surrounding views, but it undeniably lets you feel the rawness of nature. A civilized trail, on the other hand, offers convenience at the cost of losing that intimate connection with the landscape, allowing to glide through it. However, it lacks the edge and thrill that one experiences while navigating untamed paths. Progress is, after all, probably inevitable. As I've already mentioned, it undeniably benefits local communities, making life easier in what is without a doubt a challenging terrain. The ability to move quickly and relatively safely is a major advantage for most, and it's hard to expect that trails established centuries ago would be preserved solely for the thrill-seeking adventures. As you can see, luckily, nature can't always be completely controlled, and in some places it tries to reclaim the areas taken from it, but those places will undoubtedly become fewer over time. On this stretch, asphalt has lost to nature, but the rest of the road is already civilized. And not so long ago, it looked like this. Trails like these will always be remembered with a sense of nostalgia. From the road, marked as number 18 on the map, specifically in the section between Alpana and Zageri, I turned south, heading towards Kutsobi and then farther towards Orbeli. In this part of the video, I'm taking you through these picturesque villages and historic places where it's easy to forget that we're living in the 21st century. Straying off the main routes always adds a touch of advantage to a journey, allowing you to experience what I like to call the authentic side of the country. These places undoubtedly showcase what life looks like away from tourist hotspots and the polished images often presented in travel guides. Next, I take road number 16 heading east. The route follows the Rioni River and stretches between the towns of Kutaisi, Alpana and Mamisoni. As usual, I encounter herds of cows on the road, completely unfazed by the traffic, and as usual, I come across drivers who seem to completely disregard traffic rules. The sheer scale of aggressive driving and rule breaking on these roads is astonishing, and even after several days of driving here, it's still hard to get used to it. On one shortcut, which despite its smooth surface included a particularly steep incline, my heavily loaded Expedition Defender surprisingly couldn't make it up in high gear. I must admit, the slope didn't look that steep at first glance. To shift into low gear, I had to come to a stop, and upon restarting, the drivetrain made a long clunk, once again reminding me of its less than ideal condition. It's hard to ignore the impression that under heavy loads there's an issue with the drivetrain, possibly gear teeth slipping, which doesn't bode well for the future. The next stretch of the journey to Shaori Lake runs through charming forest trails, making for an enjoyable drive. There are no challenging sections to test my drivetrain again, just relatively fast gravel roads allowing me to focus solely on the scenery and covering more miles. This final segment lies between the villages of Motkiari and Nikorsminda in the Raha region. It serves as something as a shortcut, as the lake could also be reached by continuing to Ambrolari and then taking Road 17. However, I always aim to choose more scenic and less conventional roads, which is why I ended up here. I reached the lake shortly after 4:30 p.m. I drive through the marshy section with slight anxiety, wondering whether this is really a good idea because the immediate area does not offer anchor points that could be used in case of a potential stick-in. But fortunately, the ground turns out to be so compact that I do not stick in this time, so the day ends without unnecessary impressions. The place is picturesque. I'm surrounded by water from three sides. The descent to it seems friendly, so it will be possible to take a bath. Although it will later turn out that the bottom is very muddy. And generally, the time is still early enough to enjoy some peace and a book. On the way, which I just presented to you, I obviously stopped to satisfy my sense of taste as well. At a good moment, because it was raining again. I chose a roadside restaurant that served traditional Georgian cuisine. There was no menu in English, so I ordered what the owner suggested without having an idea what it would be. I got traditional khachapuri with a salad of fresh tomatoes, cucumbers and onions, and a dessert of Georgian cookies, kishmishiani, with coffee. Of course, I ordered Georgian wine too. I also bought 2 bottles of wine and honey for later. One of the wines was a gift in gratitude for a small gift for the owner's granddaughter in the form of candies.
Well, that wasn't over. I just got the soup.
At the end, I was slightly surprised by the soup they brought, and suddenly there was really a lot of food. But thanks to that, I had cookies for later, so nothing was wasted. To top it all off, I also got aromatic salt to season the soup.
Salt? Okay.
No, yes.
A truly royal feast, adorned with Georgian hospitality. Definitely a nice change from my own cooking of the past few days. This restaurant was located in the town of Lenteki. I had about 85 kilometers to my place of accommodation, which I covered in about 3 hours, and I was there before 7 p.m. After an evening full of party sounds coming from the other side, the morning was exceptionally pleasant. Quiet, sunny, windless and warm. Nothing foreshadowed the latest struggles on the trail that awaited me. But not to get ahead of myself, for now, a few frames from morning activities, which were standard for this type of trip, but the charm lies in the fact that each time they are performed in completely different natural circumstances. Morning hygiene, breakfast, packing up camp, and off we go. Heading toward Hiatura, I first drove northeast, sticking to the western shore of the lake. Then, following the northern shore, I ventured onto an unpaved road running relatively close to the waterline. Almost immediately, it began to show signs of being quite waterlogged. Still, I managed to drive through all kinds of obstacles without any problems. For a while. This trap was a total surprise. I admit that a few places before had me worried whether I would be able to get through them without getting stuck, but every time I almost didn't feel them. This time, it didn't even cross my mind that such a surprise was waiting for me here. It was just a puddle in the grass, like many I've driven through, but not this time.
All right.
I tried to get out a few times on my own, but I felt that the wheels were only grinding hopelessly in place and the car was barely moving. So having learned from experience that such actions usually only worsen the situation because the car gets stuck deeper and deeper, I decided to use the winch right away.
All right.
As you can see, the water reached the rock slider. This meant that the frame, axles and everything that is in that height under the car was already resting on the ground, so it became clear that I had no chance of getting out of here just like that. All that was left was to work out a method of managing the situation in a way that would allow me to get as little dirty as possible. So I decided to reach a dry part of the trail using the hood. Since this is a kind of a cherry in a pie situation of such trip, and if you want to escape from frequently used trails, you have to expect such attractions. So of course there has to be a recording of my struggles, so that you can see why at the end it turns out that moving from point A to B takes so long and the average speed is sometimes 10 kilometers per hour. I immediately decided to use the winch. It's hard to imagine how much effort it would have cost me to get out of this puddle if I didn't have one. Using the soundboards would force me to get into the mud because they are attached to the left side of the car. To use them properly, I would also have to lift the car using the high lift to get them under the wheels. That meant playing in the mud again. And it wouldn't guarantee the success considering the depth of the ruts I stuck in and the handle of wet compacted soil I had to push through with the front bumper. However, having a winch or even two, because I have a second one at the back, the operation seemed relatively simple. Since I decided to push on, the day has just started after all, and I hoped that when I left the lake area the ground would be dry, I chose the front winch. I usually use the rear one when I don't want to push myself into more trouble or I don't have anything to anchor to at the front. This time, neither was an option. For a moment, I wondered where to anchor the winch line. The more line unspooled, the easier it is for the winch to pull. However, reaching the trees would have required using an extension rope, which unfortunately was stored in the compartment on the right side. That would have forced me to step into this muddy mess. So I decided to anchor to a nearby pole, hoping I wasn't stuck so badly that the winch would have to work too hard, leaving about 2 wraps of the 4 still spooled on the drum. All that was left was to make room by moving the camera and start pulling. Final adjustment to the position of the rope, engaging the lock of the winch drum, getting into a car without muddying the interior, and action! Until now, every time I used the winch, I would connect the remote to the socket located on the hood. Getting to it would also mean accessing the side compartment of the vehicle, which would require stepping into the mud. So I decided to use the in-cabin controls I had installed while building this expedition rig, something I hadn't used until now. As you saw, even though I engaged the drivetrain and all 4 wheels were trying to help pull me out of the mess, the winch light didn't loosen, which meant the wheels were slipping on the surface rather than gaining enough traction to climb out of the hole. Here's what the stuck spot looked like. Seemingly nothing major, but without the deceptive grass cover, it clearly appeared as potential trouble, and I probably wouldn't have chosen to drive into it knowingly. Thankfully, that was behind me now. All that remained was to unhook from the pole, which required moving forward a bit to loosen the rope. Then I had to reel the winch rope back into the drum and cover the winch to protect it from the outside conditions, as well as protect the rope itself from the UV radiation to which it's sensitive. Once that was done, I was ready to hit the road again. I had covered only 7 kilometers from the campsite, so it's fair to say the attractions began pretty early this day. It was only 9:30 a.m., but I had only 50 more kilometers to cover, so I still wasn't nervous.
Let's carry on.
The nature of the trail leading farther to the southeast had not changed much. I kept encountering larger or smaller puddles, more or less run over. Occasionally, the road completely disappeared into dense grass, and at times I had to push through thick undergrowth. Fortunately, none of these obstacles stopped me as much as the one right after leaving the overnight camp, and after a few more kilometers, I finally made it onto gravel roads. From there, I navigated narrow paths winding between the fences of the villages I passed, only to face yet another challenge shortly after. Forest tracks that bore the marks of heavy struggles with marsh terrain. The sogginess of the road, combined with its steep incline and a drop-off to the right, was a ready recipe for disaster if approached without caution. The deep ruts on the right side suggested that the heavy machinery with some huge wheels had been battling the terrain, and I was determined not to end up into the holes on my right side. Even the less than perfect condition of my drive, such an adventure would have turned out unpleasant. While the width of the trail seemed enough, the stability of the surface in such places is always uncertain. A sudden wheel slip could lead to unnecessary trouble. Even my drone had to be extra cautious with its sensors, as you can hear, working overtime. Things didn't improve from there. The trail became increasingly rocky and climbed steeply. This is where my drive time was put to test again. The weight of the vehicle was a factor, and these kind of climbs, where one wheel grabs onto rocks for traction while another slips on loose ground, or even worse, when the axle articulation is so extreme that I'm holding on just two wheels, front right and rear left, posed a significant challenge for the locking differentials, which had to continuously adapt to the rapidly changing wheel speeds. To make things easier, the trail also became increasingly narrow and boggy. If I wasn't navigating rocky inclines, I was tackling swampy hills for variety. The farther I went, the more it felt like no one had driven this route in a long time, and this started to worry me. What if the terrain became completely impassable? The farther I went, the more it felt like no one had driven this route in a long time, and this started to worry me. What if the trail became completely impassable? I would have to turn around and fight my way back through the same challenging terrain, but this time downhill. Everything was happening on this stretch, and as I looked at how much more I have to cover, I started to wonder if continuing made sense. However, when I finally emerged onto the vast Caucasus meadows and the ground became friendlier, I felt a huge sense of relief, regained faith in the success of this journey. The entire ascent took me over 2 hours, during which I covered 21 kilometers. The average speed was just 9 kilometers per hour. Keep this in mind if you're considering adding this route to your plan. Reaching the summit of Mount Setsalayk, which I climbed here, was also a bit of a challenge. The incline was steep, and in some places the trail ran across the slope, which would have been quite concerning to drive on empty tires if the grass had been wet. The scenery was absolutely breathtaking. The idyllic landscape, covered with a green carpet of grass and adorned with yellow, purple and blue flowers, was stunning. Add to that the clouds drifting across the sky, animating the terrain with the shifting shadow cast over the hills, and the whole scene felt like a dynamic yet static painting crafted by nature. A spot near what appeared to be a shelter, possibly for shepherds but maybe also for hikers, was the perfect place to rest after the mountain struggles. Each time, I'm grateful to have my drone on these trips, as experiencing this terrain without it would be far less fulfilling. Mount Setsalayk rises to 1996 meters above sea level and forms a natural border between the Raha and Imereti regions. Composed primarily of dolomitic limestone, it is known for its distinctive karst formations, especially prominent on its northwestern slopes. The boundary, clearly marked, as you must admit, offers panoramic views of the upper Imereti that are particularly enchanting during the spring bloom. I imagine the area must be just as, if not more, beautiful during the lash of colors of autumn foliage. Regardless of the season, it's worth visiting to experience the trails far removed from human settlements and still pristine in their beauty. The descent from the summit naturally involves driving back into the dense forest. And that, of course, means shaded trails, which in turn often mean waterlogged paths. The road on the southern side is significantly less wild and, as a result, less demanding, but some sections still pose quite a challenge. This particular stretch seemed like a guaranteed spot for getting stuck. It combined deep, water-filled ruts with no option for a detour, making it almost certain that I would get bogged down. Fully convinced of this, I even set up my camera to capture the action in 3D, for viewing in episode 3 of Immersive Georgia. However, this time I managed to stay on top of the ruts and the entire crossing went surprisingly smoothly. I slid slightly near the end, but I made it out without any trouble. What you saw here was a summary of the 55 kilometers route I completed in 5 hours and 20 minutes. The average speed was 10 kilometers per hour, and it's safe to say it was anything but boring. And so I reached Hiatura. During those long hours spent in the mountains, concentrating on overcoming obstacles, concentrating on the sounds coming from the drive and generally immersing myself in the operation of crossing these bloody mountains, I had completely forgotten about food and about something like hunger, which at the moment, however, had came back with double force. So the first thing I did when I reached that town was to find a place where I could boil water and prepare a quick freeze-dried meal. The place where I stopped looked generally like this. You might get the impression that some warfare had just ended here. I'm convinced that the building behind me used to be some kind of school. All schools from the communist area looked the same. Now, it is a total ruin, although it would seem that you can still hear children laughing within its walls. If it weren't for the fact that I occasionally encounter people here, you might think that the entire area was completely deserted. While I was waiting for the water to reach the boiling point, I raised, despite the really strong wind, a drone and took a look at the immediate area. Hiatura located in the Imereti region of Georgia, is a fascinating city known for its unique industrial and cultural history. It stands out for several reasons. Firstly, reaching it requires deviating from most main tourist routes. However, it's a mecca for explorers and urban exploration enthusiasts seeking abandoned towns like this. Secondly, Chetura is a striking example of a fallen city, filled with ruined monumental factories and post-Soviet buildings that were once grand but are now cloaked in the patina of neglect. And finally, most Georgians tend to leave this place rather than visit it. It's not a typical tourist destination, nor frequently mentioned in travel guides to Georgia. Despite the fact that the city's main attraction, a unique cable car system, has largely ceased operation, Chetura remains a compelling destination for those interested in industrial history, Soviet architecture, and distinctive landscapes. Up until the late 19th century, the residents of Kvirila, a small village in the Imereti nestled in the deep valley of the Black River, lived peacefully in harmony with nature. Kvirila was situated in a picturesque gore and, like many Georgian villages, boasted unique mountain landscape. Everything began to change in 1879 when rich manganese deposits, a key resource for global industry, were discovered there. It was the Georgian poet Akaki Tsereteli who led the search for these valuable ores in the late 19th century. His efforts were hugely successful as Chetura's land contained over 230 million tons of manganese ore ready for commercial extraction. By 1905, manganese production in Chetura accounted for a staggering 60% of global demand. The industry gained particular importance after the 1917 October Revolution, though even before World War I, Georgia had already become the world leader in manganese extraction and export. This booming industry significantly boosted the national economy. In 1921, the once small village of Kvirila was transformed into an industrial city with a new name, Chetura. In the 1950s, Soviet authorities envisioned turning the mining town into a paradise for its growing workforce. They constructed parks, hospitals, cultural centers, stadiums, bathhouses, schools, kindergartens, and, of course, large residential complexes. The city's architecture became closely intertwined with its dramatic natural surroundings. Steep cliffs rose on both sides of the Kvirila River, and many buildings and roads precariously clung to rocky slopes. Due to Chetura's location in a narrow river valley with limited space for expansion, the city grew vertically. New residential areas and mines were developed on the high hills surrounding the city, with some neighborhoods located as much as 150 meters above the center. As the city expanded, transportation issue arose. Reaching the higher areas required long detours via winding roads. To address this, Soviet authorities, eager to further develop the region's mining industry, approved the construction of an unconventional urban transportation system in 1950, named Line 25. The project involved a network of cable cars connecting various parts of the city situated at different elevations. The first two lines opened in 1954. One provided access to newly built high-rise neighborhood on a southern cliff, while the other shortened the commute to a mine overlooking the city. Over the next decade, 16 additional lines were built, spanning a total of 6 kilometers. By the 1980s, the Chetura region, including the neighboring industrial town of Shakher, had around 25 cable car lines in operation. At its peak, more than 30,000 residents relied on this free aerial transportation system for the daily commute, using it to get to work, the market, school, or even the cinema. Chetura's fortunes began to wane after Georgia gained independence in 1991. The collapse of the Soviet Union led to withdrawal of funding for the mines, a drop in manganese demand, and the city's gradual decline. Residents left en masse, and the once thriving industrial hub began to transform into a surreal, desolate town. The 1990s were particularly dark times, marked by civil war, two conflicts over separatist regions, and political struggles. Few cared about the mines or miners during this turbulent period. The population of Yatura plummeted from tens of thousands to just 13,000 today, many of whom live in poverty. The city's iconic cable car system continued to operate sporadically until 2019, despite its deteriorating condition. Locals and occasional tourists traveled in rusted glassless gondolas with hulls which seemed as they hadn't been maintained for decades. Remarkably, no major accidents occurred except for a 2008 incident in which 12 passengers were stranded in a gondola above a gore for 12 hours. Today, Yatura's remaining residents live amidst crumbling infrastructure. Abandoned Soviet-era buildings cling to the cliffs and disused mines dot the landscape. The city, with its eerie, desolate atmosphere, could easily serve as the setting for a horror film. In the empty schools, decrepit residential blocks, life seems to have been paused indefinitely. Such scenes highlight the struggles of towns like Yatura, where industrial collapse forced people to migrate elsewhere in search of opportunities. Beneath Yatura's surface lies a darker story. During the city's mining heyday, thousands of workers toil in grueling conditions, often working 18-hour shifts underground with little respite. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, then a young revolutionary, leveraged Yatura's manganese miners to bolster Bolshevik support. Through a mix of coercion and cunning, he gained control of the mines, arming miners and turning the town into a Bolshevik stronghold in an otherwise Menshevik-leaning country. In 1906, a pivotal event, the robbery of a train carrying miners' wages, sparked a 55-day strike. This marked the beginning of significant labor reforms, including demand for an 8-hour workday and higher wages. Despite its decline, Yatura remains a unique destination for fans of industrial tourism and abandoned places. Few other locations offer such a surreal combination of disused mines, rusting cable cars, empty Soviet-era blocks, and eerie hospitals, all in one place. Yatura may not be for everyone, but perhaps one day this forgotten city will experience a renaissance. Until then, it stands as a haunting reminder of industrial ambition and its eventual decline.